Hello, grade 12 scholars. It's Miss Novak here. We are at the very end of week 4. We are in lesson 19 of your ELA online learning. Let's get started with this lesson. We've learned so much over the course of the past 2 weeks. Yesterday, we explored the author's choice to include personal experiences in her informal essay. We've learned a lot about her childhood, her family history, and her experiences in Britain. We've also learned a lot about British history in the Caribbean, the Caribbean slave trade, how Caribbean slavery is addressed in British history today, and the author's opinion on this. Today we'll be tying our thoughts together by connecting our understanding of the text to one of the unit's essential questions about how British colonialism complicates the idea of home, not just for the author, but for countless others. After you complete today's lesson, make sure you engage with someone at home around your learning. I know this might be a continuation of the discussions that you've already had, but again, this text brings up so many important subjects, we can't help but discuss it. Next, make sure you work on your fluency for the week. And lastly, carving out that additional 20 minutes to independently read is really important. Let's get started. Okay, so let's feel good on a Friday because I think this puzzle is a little bit easier than those that precede it. So this is a word puzzle of the day, also known as a pictogram. I'll give you a few minutes to analyze the image and to come back with a response. What do you think this is bringing up, a word or phrase? Give you a few minutes to think about this. Read between the lines. I know, if you didn't get it, you were like, oh, that's obvious. Well, today we're going to be applying our learning from reading between the lines over the past 2 weeks in our reaction to this essay in our writing. Let's get started. Our lesson materials can all be found in our learning packets. I actually want to decorate the front cover of this now that I'm seeing it plain in front of me. Lesson 19 is available on page 61. Your note catcher is available on page 62. Just make sure that you have something to write with. Again, reviewing this, even before we go through it in today's video, is always helpful. As always, the text, which is probably so highly decorated now with multiple colors, underlines, annotations, is available in your packet on pages 32 to 40. Here's our learning target for today. Let's read it together. I can write informative text to examine and convey complex ideas and information clearly and accurately through the effective selection, organization, and analysis of content. Whew, this is a heavy one. So we know that we're finishing our study of the text today by examining one of the unit's guiding questions. How did British colonialism complicate the idea of home? You'll be answering this question at the end of this lesson by writing a 2-paragraph response. I'll be asking you to organize your piece and include details from the text in your answer. Let's launch into today's learning with a lot of energy and understanding. Let's review the lesson overview. We know that we're going to be rereading our notes and annotations that we've made over the past 2 weeks on Back to My Country. Next, we're going to think about how visiting Jamaica affected the author's perceptions of her home, which is Britain. You're going to think about Britain's actions in the Caribbean and how they treat the topic today. With your family member or caregiver or friend, you're going to answer the following question. How do these affect the author, who has a Caribbean heritage? Interesting. So it brings the past into the present. Your writing task for today, of course, will be captured in your note catcher, will be a 2-paragraph informative response to answer the following question. How did British colonialism complicate the idea of home? We're going to ask you to use at least 2 transitional words or phrases. If you want, refer to week 1 learning. That's where you'll find a lot of resources and at the least some guidance. Let's engage in today's lesson and wrap up our learning over the past 2 weeks. Your reading task today is to reread your notes and annotations. I know this is far beyond a first read and a close read. This is like a close read. but I can assure you that you're setting yourself up for success when you review your notes and annotations. This will definitely help with your written response at the end of this lesson. Here's something to think about. Think about how visiting Jamaica affected the author's perceptions of her home in Britain. Remember, she had never been. Although she's heard some things from her parents, she actually got to see from firsthand experience what life in the Caribbean was like in present day. And I'm sure she engaged with a lot of family members who told her even more information about previous years. Capture your notes in the margins of your text. Next, for the talking component of today's lesson, think about Britain's actions in the Caribbean and how they treat the topic today. With your family member, caregiver, or friend, talk about the following question. How do these affect the author who is of Caribbean heritage? In this little talk box down below, I'll give you a little bit of framing of how you might want to approach this conversation. First, I tell my friend, family member, or caregiver about Britain's history in the Caribbean, specifically with how they colonized the area and the history of slavery in the area. I'll make sure to reference the text if I need to. Next, I'll tell them how Britain treats this topic today. I remember the author mentioning how there was only one lesson at school that talked about the slave trade in the Caribbean. Finally, I'll tell them how I think this makes the author feel, since this is her heritage and her background. We'll engage in a conversation, and maybe I'll develop even more new insight. Let's make sure we understand our daily writing assignment, especially because this one is a culminating exercise. So on your note catcher, you'll write a 2-paragraph informative response to answer the following question. How did British colonialism complicate the idea of home? You'll be asked to use at least 2 transition words. And on top of that, you'll be asked to use at least 2 vocabulary words that we studied at the beginning of this week. Your vocabulary words from this week are assimilate, entitlement, upbringing, myriad, indigenous, and hybrid. The transition words are on page 15 of your learning packet. So if I were you, I might refer back and maybe even keep that page open to flip back and forth to if you need that reference. This will take a little bit of time, but I can assure you it's going to help seal in all of that learning from these past 2 weeks. Just in case you didn't expend too much energy and flip back just yet, here's page 15 in your learning packet and some transitional words and phrases. I'll tell you a couple of my favorites. For example, otherwise, as well as, furthermore. They're all used for different purposes, but it's really important to add transitional words and phrases in your writing because it helps it flow better. You'll see what I mean once you have a finished writing product. Let's continue with a little bit more of a review of transitional words and phrases. So the words that are underlined in blue in this table show contrast. They help you to develop an idea in opposition to another. For example, the author uses a transitional word that shows contrast in paragraph 33. She notes, and conversely, Britain growing up to become a world power, its attitudes to race and even how it sees itself today, these things are in no small part the legacy the British Caribbean has left to modern-day Britain. Again, it's showing an idea in opposition to the one that just preceded it. In the table, these blue underlined words will also help you do just that. If you're interested in transitional words or phrases that show an example, check out the ones that are underlined on the chart. For example is one of them. I know, obvious. In other words is also one of them. Let's take a look at this example from the guidance in the text. Author's point of view and purpose. An essay is a short work of nonfiction that explores a specific topic and conveys a distinct point of view. The author's ideas, beliefs, and judgments about a specific topic. For example, in Back to My Own Country, an essay, Andrea Levy shares her point of view about growing up Black in the predominantly white culture of 1960s London. If you'd like to use examples in your own writing, feel free to use these transitions. Probably some of my favorite transitions to use are transitions that showcase causation. For example, I'm giving an example again, and I'm using another transitional phrase. Anyways, this example from the text, it was too foreign and therefore not worth knowing, in paragraph 16. Additional words that show causation are accordingly, consequently, as a result, really good one, for that reason, and therefore. Feel free to use these in your writing. You also might want to show importance or intensity. Let's take a look at the words that are underlined here. Above all, or on a deeper level. Let's take a look at the right-hand margin. On a deeper level, language barriers may leave new immigrants feeling isolated, cut off from jobs, education, and even friendships. This is in paragraph 3. I really like that phrase, on a deeper level. Makes you stop, pause, and reflect and note what's coming next is really important. Again, this might be a great addition to your 2-paragraph informative response. And lastly, we might want to use transitional words or phrases that showcase similarity, such as besides, likewise, or similarly. Let's take a look at our example. In addition to an economic divide, post-war Britain felt the effects of racial and colonial divisions. So while that's not listed in the table, you could also use that phrase in addition to, because it's grouping like elements. Feel free to use this one too. Here's your daily writing assignment. Make sure that you're challenging yourself as you're writing this informative response. And by challenge, I mean try to use transitional words or phrases from 2 different categories. And when you're using the vocabulary word, make sure the meaning really comes across in your writing. Vocabulary words, again, from lesson 15 are assimilate, entitlement, upbringing, myriad, indigenous, and hybrid. I know that you have the transitional words and phrases in your packet. You also have the definitions of these words as well. Share your writing with someone and relate it back to the essential question. What does it mean to call a place home? This is an important learning experience. We've just completed our writing assignment, which encompasses 2 full weeks of learning. Next week, we'll launch into new learning in lesson 20. In lesson 20, we will start reading a history of the English church and people. So get yourself ready for some heavy annotations and some deep thinking. Thank you so much for learning with me today. Again, I'm Miss Novak, and I can't wait to launch into next week's learning with you. As always, here are reminders for today. Discuss your writing with someone at home. It's always important to reinforce what you've learned through a discussion. Next, read for 20 minutes and complete your reading log entries. I know it might seem like an additional task, but when you start charting your reading, it really makes a difference in your motivation. And as always, finish up the week with a fluency exercise. Document your fluency work in your work packet. We'll see you next week.